I never thought I'd be the kind of person who measures their life in absences. The empty chair at dinner. The unanswered texts. The silence where laughter used to be. But here I am, 26 years old, sitting alone in an apartment that still feels like it belongs to someone else, wondering when exactly everything shattered. I guess that's the thing about breaking. It happens both suddenly and gradually. A slow-motion collision you never see coming until you're already in pieces. 3 months ago, I had friends. I had what I thought was a solid group. People who knew me, who I'd grown with, who I assumed would always be there. Now I have memories that feel increasingly like they happened to someone else, and a hollowness that expands a little more each day. And the worst part? It all started with something as simple as a birthday party. My birthday party. Maybe if I'd just done things differently that night. Maybe if I'd been more sensitive, more aware. Maybe if I hadn't been so caught up in my own feelings, my own desires. But maybes don't change anything, do they? They just haunt you at 3 a.m. when you can't sleep. Planning your own birthday shouldn't be complicated. That's what I kept telling myself as I stared at my phone, thumb hovering over the send button. I'd drafted the message at least 15 times, deleting, rewriting, trying to find the perfect words. Looking back, I should have recognized that hesitation for what it was, the first tremor before an earthquake. Our friend group had been together since freshman year of college. 5 of us, inseparable, through 4 years of all-nighters, bad decisions, heartbreaks, and celebrations. We graduated together, somehow all ending up in the same city afterward. It felt like fate. But over the past year, things had shifted in ways I couldn't quite articulate. 3 of us had started dating people, myself included. What had once been a simple dynamic became increasingly complicated. My partner and I had been together for about a year. Unlike my friends' relationships, ours felt seamless. They fit into our group naturally, never pulling me away, always adding rather than subtracting. I was proud of that, though I never said it out loud. Maybe that pride was part of the problem. I never stopped to think about how it might look from the outside. For my birthday, I wanted everyone together. All 5 of us, plus our partners, 8 people total. Simple enough. But when I mentioned it to my 2 roommates, the only ones in our group who were single, their reaction wasn't what I expected. "Do you have to invite everyone's partners?" one of them asked, not quite meeting my eyes. "Yeah, why not?" I replied, genuinely confused. "It's just different when they're around. The other 2, they become different people." "What do you mean? They're not themselves?" "They get quiet. Everything becomes about their relationships. It's like they disappear." The conversation stuck with me for days. I couldn't stop thinking about it, turning it over in my mind, examining it from every angle. Was it true? Had I been so wrapped up in my own relationship that I hadn't noticed my friends fading away? Or were my roommates just feeling left out, watching the group dynamic change as more of us coupled off? I didn't want to choose between my friends and our partners. I didn't want to create divisions. But most of all, I didn't want to be without my partner on my birthday. We lived in different parts of the city. Our schedules rarely aligned, and these celebrations were the moments we treasured. The thought of not having them there felt wrong, like deliberately leaving a part of myself behind. In the end, I made a decision that seemed fair at the time. I would invite my partner, but ask my other 2 friends to come alone. I told myself it was a compromise, a way to honor everyone's needs. I convinced myself it was the mature thing to do. I sent the invitations individually, carefully wording the messages to my friends with partners. "I'm keeping it small this year," I wrote. "Just the original crew, plus my partner since they've been looking forward to it." The responses came quickly. Too quickly. Simple sounds good text that felt hollow, missing the excitement of previous years. But I ignored the knot in my stomach. I was turning 26. I deserved to celebrate how I wanted. Didn't I? The night of my birthday started with a tension I could feel, but couldn't name. We met at a restaurant. My choice. An upscale place I'd been wanting to try. Everyone arrived on time, brought gifts, smiled for photos. From the outside, it probably looked perfect. But underneath, something was wrong. My 2 friends whose partners weren't invited kept checking their phones. Their smiles never quite reached their eyes. They participated in conversations, but didn't initiate them. I told myself they were just tired. I told myself I was overthinking things. I told myself a lot of things that weren't true. My partner sensed the awkwardness, shooting me questioning glances throughout dinner. I squeezed their hand under the table, a silent reassurance that everything was fine. Another lie, After dinner, we went bowling as planned. The physical activity should have broken the ice, gotten everyone laughing, and trash-talking like old times. Instead, it highlighted the divisions. My roommates formed their own team. My other two friends paired up. My partner and I played together. What should have been a friendly competition felt like three separate events happening simultaneously. Halfway through the second game, one of my friends, the one who'd been dating their partner the longest, got a call. They stepped away, spoke in hushed tones, then returned with an apologetic smile. "I've got to head out," they said. "Something came up with my partner. Sorry. Happy birthday again." They left before I could process what was happening. Their absence felt like a physical thing, a void that couldn't be filled. The rest of us continued playing, but the energy had shifted even further. An hour later, my other friend with a partner made a similar exit. "Early meeting tomorrow," they said, though it was Friday and I knew they didn't work weekends. By the end of the night, it was just me, my partner, and my two roommates. We finished bowling in near silence, the sound of pins falling the only thing filling the space between us. When we said goodbye in the parking lot, the hugs felt perfunctory, mechanical. I watched my roommates drive away together, wondering if they'd talk about me on the way home. Wondering what they'd say. My partner squeezed my shoulder. "Did you have a good birthday?" they asked. I nodded and smiled. Another lie to add to the collection. The next few weeks passed in a strange limbo. Our group chat, once active daily, fell silent. Plans that had been tentatively discussed, weekend trips, game nights, concerts, were never mentioned again. When I reached out individually, I got polite but brief responses. Everyone was suddenly busy, overwhelmed with work, dealing with family issues. The excuses were plausible, but felt hollow. My partner noticed, of course. "Have you talked to your friends lately?" They'd ask, concern evident in their voice. I'd shrug, make some comment about everyone being busy with their own lives. But inside, panic was building. I replayed my birthday night over and over, analyzing every interaction, every word, every silence. Had I been selfish? Inconsiderate? I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd crossed some invisible line, violated some unspoken rule of our friendship. The truth hit me one night as I scrolled through social media. A photo appeared in my feed. My four friends together at a bar I didn't recognize. Their partners were there too, all smiling, glasses raised in a toast. The caption read simply, "Friday night done right. I hadn't been invited." More than that, they had deliberately excluded me, while including the very partners I'd asked not to come to my birthday. The message couldn't have been clearer if they'd written it in neon lights. "You chose. Now, we're choosing too." I showed my partner the photo, my hands shaking. "Am I overreacting?" I asked, hoping desperately that I was. They looked at the image for a long moment, then at me. "I think," they said carefully, "this might be about more than just your birthday." And deep down, I knew they were right. The birthday had been a catalyst, not a cause. Something had been fracturing in our friendship for months, maybe years. I just hadn't wanted to see it. I'm not proud of what I did next. Hurt and anger make us do things we wouldn't normally consider. I texted one of my roommates, the one I'd always been closest to, and asked point blank why I hadn't been invited to their gathering. The response came hours later, a single sentence that cut deeper than I expected. "We figured you'd be busy with your partner." The passive aggression in those words ignited something in me. Without thinking it through, I called them. When they answered, sounding guarded, I launched into a tirade. Why were they punishing me? Why was it okay for them to exclude me, but not okay for me to make decisions about my own birthday? Why couldn't they just tell me what was really bothering them? "You want to know what's bothering us?" they finally interrupted. "Find out. You've changed. Ever since you started dating your partner, you've been different. You only half listen when we talk. You cancel plans last minute. You're physically present but mentally somewhere else. And that birthday party, that was just the final straw." "What are you talking about?" I demanded. "I haven't changed. And I invited my partner to my birthday because they're important to me." "How is that a crime?" "It's not about inviting your partner," they said, their voice growing quieter. "It's about telling our other friends they couldn't bring theirs. It's about the double standard. It's about you deciding your relationship matters more than everyone else's." "That's not what I meant," I protested. "You guys were the ones who said our friends act differently around their partners. You said you didn't want them there. We said they act differently." We never said exclude their partners while including yours. Do you have any idea how that made them feel? How it made all of us feel. The conversation continued in circles, growing more heated, then more resigned. By the end, we weren't even arguing anymore. We were just stating facts, laying out perspectives that seemed impossible to reconcile. When we finally hung up, nothing had been resolved. If anything, the distance between us felt even greater. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing their words, feeling the weight of their accusations. Had I really changed that much? Had I been so absorbed in my relationship that I'd neglected my friendships? I wanted to dismiss their claims as jealousy or oversensitivity, but something stopped me. A nagging voice in the back of my mind that whispered, "What if they're right?" The next few days passed in a haze of self-examination. I began to notice things I'd been blind to before. How often I checked my phone when with my roommates, hoping for a text from my partner. How many times I'd said we instead of I when making plans or expressing opinions. How frequently I compared my friends' relationships to my own, always finding theirs wanting in some way. I started digging through old messages, old photos, looking for evidence of when things had changed. And slowly, painfully, I found it. Canceled plans. Half-hearted apologies. Conversations where I'd steered the topic back to my relationship, regardless of what we'd been discussing. Little moments of prioritizing my partner over my friends, not occasionally, which would have been normal, but consistently, repeatedly, until it became a pattern none of us had named. The worst realization came when I found a video from a camping trip we'd taken 6 months earlier. In it, we were sitting around a fire, passing a bottle, laughing at some inside joke. My partner hadn't been able to come on that trip, and I remembered being disappointed. But watching the video, I didn't see disappointment on my face. I saw joy. Pure, unfiltered connection with the people who'd been my anchors for years. When had that changed? When had I started seeing my friends as secondary characters in the story of my relationship? And why hadn't I noticed it happening? I thought about reaching out to them, apologizing, trying to explain. But what would I say? Sorry, I've been a self-absorbed friend who created a hierarchy of relationships with mine at the top. The truth was too raw, too embarrassing to voice. And part of me, a part I wasn't proud of, was still angry. Still felt they'd overreacted. Still believed they could have handled things differently. So instead of reaching out, I retreated further. I threw myself into my relationship, spending every free moment with my partner, convincing myself that this was what adult life looked like. Friendships fade. Romantic relationships take precedence. It's natural. It's normal. It's growing up. But even as I told myself these things, I knew they weren't entirely true. My partner, sensing my distress, tried to encourage me to reconnect with my friends. "Relationships shouldn't cost you friendships," they said one night as we lay in bed. "If being with me is making you lose people you care about, then something's wrong. It's not because of you," I insisted. "It's them. They're jealous or resentful or something. Maybe," they conceded. "Or maybe it's more complicated than that." They were right, of course. It was more complicated. It wasn't about them versus my friends. It was about me, about choices I'd made without even realizing I was making them. About a slow, subtle shift in priorities that had eventually created a chasm too wide to easily cross. 2 weeks turned into a month. A month became 2. Life continued. Work, home, relationship, repeat. I made half-hearted attempts to engage with my friend. A text here, a comment on social media there. But the responses remained polite and distant. The warmth was gone. My partner tried to fill the void, introducing me to their friends, planning activities, creating new routine. I was grateful for their efforts, truly. But there was something missing. A specific kind of comfort that comes only from people who've known you across time, who've witnessed your evolution, who hold pieces of your history. On particularly low nights, I'd find myself scrolling through old photos, watching the progression of our friendship from eager freshmen to confident graduates. I'd see inside jokes documented in captions, evidence of adventures I'd forgotten, moments of connection captured forever in pixels. And I'd feel a loss so profound it was physical, an ache in my chest, a heaviness in my limbs. My partner found me like that one evening, curled on the couch with my phone, tears streaming silently down my face. Without a word, they sat beside me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "You know," they said after a while, "it's not too late." "What do you mean?" "To fix things, to try." I shook my head. "You don't understand. It's been too long. Too much has happened. Maybe they agree. But maybe not. Maybe they miss you as much as you miss them. I wanted to believe that was true. I wanted to believe our years of friendship could withstand this rupture. But fear held me back. Fear of rejection. Fear of confronting my own failings. Fear of discovering that I was more replaceable than I'd ever imagined. Instead, I continued in limbo. Not quite moving on, not quite trying to reconnect. Existing in a space between acceptance and denial. My relationship with my partner deepened in some ways. They'd seen me at my most vulnerable, after all. But in others, it suffered. I couldn't fully engage, couldn't fully give myself to our shared future when so much of my past felt unresolved. And somewhere in that strange, suspended state, something unexpected happened. I started to change. Really change, not just in my relationship habits, but in how I saw myself, how I understood my place in the world. Isolation has a way of forcing introspection. Without the comfort of my friend group, without the identity I'd built as part of that unit, I had to confront who I was on my own terms. It wasn't always pleasant. In fact, it was often painful. I discovered patterns of behavior I wasn't proud of, not just with my friends, but in many aspects of my life. A tendency to prioritize what felt good in the moment over what might be better long term. A habit of avoiding difficult conversations until they became impossible to have. A subtle but persistent selfishness that I'd managed to justify for years. These realizations didn't come all at once. They accumulated gradually, emerging from sleepless nights and quiet moments of honesty. And with each one the same question arose: was I capable of being better? Not just saying sorry, not just making temporary adjustments, but fundamentally changing how I showed up in my relationships. I didn't have an answer. But for the first time, I was asking the question. And that felt like a beginning. 3 months after my birthday, I ran into one of my friends at a coffee shop across town. I'd gone there specifically because it wasn't our usual place, because I wanted to avoid any chance encounters. The universe, it seemed, had other plans. I spotted them before they saw me. They were waiting for their order, scrolling through their phone, looking exactly as I remembered. For a moment, I considered leaving before they noticed me. But something, courage or desperation, or simple exhaustion with the status quo, kept me rooted in place. When they looked up, and our eyes met, their expressions cycled rapidly through surprise, discomfort, and something I couldn't quite identify. Not warmth exactly, but not pure coldness either. They raised a hand in acknowledgement. I did the same. After collecting their drink, they hesitated, then walked toward my table. "Hey," they said. "Hey," I replied, my heart pounding so hard I was sure they could hear it. "Mind if I—" They gestured to the empty chair across from me. I nodded, not trusting my voice. They sat down, placing their cup carefully on the table between us. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The ambient noise of the coffee shop, espresso machines hissing, conversations humming, chairs scraping, filled the silence. "How are you?" they finally asked. The question so ordinary, it almost made me laugh. How was I? Broken. Lost. Confused. Angry. Sad. Regretful. Learning. Growing. All of these things, and none of them felt adequate. "I'm okay," I said instead. "You?" "Same." "Okay." Another silence. Longer this time? I took a sip of my now lukewarm coffee, buying time, searching for the right words. There weren't any. "I miss you guys," I said finally, the admission burning my throat like acid. "All of you." They looked down at their cup, tracing the rim with their finger. "We miss you too," they said quietly. "It's been different." "I'm sorry," I started, but they shook their head. "Not here. Not like this." I nodded, understanding. A coffee shop encounter wasn't the place for the conversation we needed to have. What? Too public, too random, too loaded with the potential for misunderstanding. "Do you think—" I hesitated, then pushed forward. "Do you think we could talk sometime? All of us, maybe?" They didn't answer immediately. I watched their face, trying to read what they were thinking, feeling. After what felt like hours, they nodded slightly. "I can't speak for everyone," they said. "But I'd be willing to try." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even a promise of reconciliation. But it was something, a crack in the wall that had formed between us, a small opening where light could potentially enter. We talked for a few more minutes, careful, superficial exchanges about work and weather. When they stood to leave, I felt a surge of panic. What if this was it? What if this brief, awkward interaction was all I got? I really am sorry, I blurted out. For everything. They paused, then met my eyes directly for the first time. I know, they said. Me too. Those 3 words, me too, carried me through the rest of the day. They acknowledged that the fracture hadn't been entirely my fault, that there was shared responsibility, shared pain. They suggested that perhaps, just perhaps, there could be shared healing as well. The meeting took 2 weeks to arrange. Schedules had to be coordinated, neutral territory agreed upon, parameters established. We decided on a Sunday afternoon at a park we'd frequented in college. No partners, no distractions. Just the 5 of us, facing each other and the mess we'd made. I arrived first, deliberately early, needing time to settle my nerves. I chose a spot under a large oak tree, away from the main paths, where we could talk without constant interruptions. As I waited, I rehearsed what I wanted to say, though I knew from experience that such preparations rarely survived contact with actual conversation. They arrived together, all 4 of them. Seeing them approach as a unit sent a pang through my chest, a visual reminder of the united front they'd formed in my absence. But I pushed the thought aside. This wasn't about keeping score or nurturing resentments. It was about trying to rebuild something valuable that had been damaged. The initial greetings were stiff, formal. We arranged ourselves in a rough circle on the grass, maintaining physical distance that mirrored our emotional state. For a few minutes, no one seemed willing to begin. We commented on the weather, the park, trivial things that wouldn't normally have warranted mention between friends as close as we once were. Finally, one of my roommates spoke up. So, they said, I think we should just get into it. We've all been avoiding each other for months, and it's not good for any of us. Murmurs of agreement circled the group. I took a deep breath, gathering my courage. I want to start by apologizing, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. What I did with my birthday, inviting my partner, but asking you two not to bring yours, it was selfish and hypocritical. I didn't think about how it would make you feel, and I'm truly sorry for that. The friends whose partners had been excluded nodded slowly, acknowledging my words without immediately accepting them. But I think, I continued, that was just the breaking point. There were problems before that, weren't there? Problems I contributed to without realizing it. You changed when you started dating your partner, one of them said, bluntly. We all noticed it. You became less present, less invested in us. The words stung, even though I'd come to recognize their truth myself. I didn't see it happening, I admitted. But looking back, yeah, I think you're right. The thing is, another friend interjected, we've all been in relationships before. It's normal to get caught up in the beginning. But with you and your partner, it just never balanced out. And when we tried to talk to you about it, you got defensive. Had you tried to talk to me about it? I asked, genuinely uncertain. Before my birthday, I mean. They exchanged glances, maybe not directly, one conceded. But there were comments, jokes. We thought you'd pick up on it. I didn't, I said simply. And that's on me. I should have been paying more attention. The conversation continued, moving back and forth between specific grievances and broader patterns. Slowly, painfully, we began to unpack months of miscommunication, assumptions, and hurt feelings. It wasn't one-sided. I wasn't the only one who had made mistakes. There had been jealousy from my single friends, unrealistic expectations of how our friendship should look post-college, resentment that had festered instead of being addressed. But through the difficult parts, something shifted. The defensive postures relaxed. The careful distance between us on the grass decreased as we leaned in, to make points or emphasize feelings. The formal tones gave way to our natural speech patterns, complete with the inside jokes and verbal shortcuts developed over years of friendship. At one point, discussing a particularly heated text exchange from months earlier, one of my friends laughed suddenly. God, we're so bad at this, they said. All of us. Communication, adulting, whatever you want to call it. The worst. Another agreed with a small smile. Complete disasters, I added. And for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of the old connection, the understanding that had once seemed so effortless between us. We talked for hours, until the afternoon light began to fade, and the park started to empty around us. We didn't solve everything. Couldn't solve everything in one conversation, but we made a start. We agreed to try again, to be more honest with each other, to stop letting small irritations grow into insurmountable barriers. As we prepared to leave, one of my friends, the one I'd run into at the coffee shop, touched my arm lightly. "Your partner," they said. "They're good for you, aren't they? Really good?" I nodded, throat tight with unexpected emotion. "Yeah," I managed. "They are. Then I'm happy for you," they said. "I'm sorry if I didn't show that before. And we'd like to know them better," another friend added. "Properly this time. Same goes for the other partners. It wasn't everything. It wasn't an immediate return to what we'd had before. But it was a beginning, a foundation we could potentially build upon." Reconciliation, I've learned, isn't an event but a process. It doesn't happen in a single heartfelt conversation or grand gesture. It happens in small moments, accumulated over time. A text asking how you're doing. An invitation to coffee. A shared memory that makes you both laugh. Each one a tiny bridge across the chasm that formed between you. In the months following our park conversation, we began the slow work of rebuilding our friendship. It wasn't easy. Old habits resurfaced. New conflicts emerged. There were setbacks and moments when it all felt too hard, too complicated. But there was also a shared commitment to trying, to finding our way back to each other, while acknowledging that the path might look different than before. My relationship with my partner evolved too. I'd been using them as a substitute for my friend group, placing unrealistic expectations on one person to fulfill all my social and emotional needs. As I reconnected with my friends, that pressure eased. Our relationship became healthier, more balanced. 6 months after my birthday, we gathered again, all 5 of us, plus our partners. It was awkward at first, everyone feeling their way through new dynamics. But by the end of the night, something remarkable had happened. The group had expanded, not fractured. Different connections had formed. My partner and one of my roommates discovering a shared interest in obscure films. One friend's partner engaging another in passionate debate about music. The boundaries between original friends and partners began to blur, creating something new and unexpected. Watching them interact, I felt a profound sense of gratitude, mixed with regret. So much time wasted on misunderstandings and hurt pride. So many moments lost to distance we'd created ourselves. But perhaps that's the nature of growing up, learning through loss, understanding through absence. I know now what I couldn't see then, that relationships, all relationships, require intentional care. That balance isn't something that happens naturally, but something you create daily, through choices large and small. That sometimes the most important conversations are the ones that feel most uncomfortable to have. I still have moments of doubt, times when I wonder if things will ever truly be the same between us. But maybe they're not supposed to be the same. Maybe they're supposed to be different, more conscious, more deliberate, more appreciative of what almost slipped away. The empty spaces remain, in a sense. Months of experiences we didn't share. Inside jokes we weren't part of. But they're no longer expanding, no longer threatening to swallow everything we built together. Instead, they're simply part of our story now. A chapter neither of us would have chosen, but one that, perhaps, we needed to live through. I don't know what the future holds for our friendship, or for any of our relationships. People change. Lives diverge. Nothing is guaranteed. But I know this, I won't take them for granted again. I won't mistake silence for understanding or assumption for communication. I won't let fear of conflict prevent necessary conversations. These are small promises, perhaps, quiet resolutions made in the aftermath of rupture. But they feel significant to me, stepping stones across the empty space that once seemed impossibly wide. And with each step, that space grows smaller, fills with new experiences, new understandings, new appreciation for the complex, imperfect, essential connections that shape our lives. In the end, maybe that's what friendship really is, not the absence of conflict, but the willingness to move through it together. Not perfect understanding, but perfect effort. Not an unbroken line, but a path that sometimes diverges, sometimes reconnects, but always, always matters.